Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is the Delphian Oracles by Manly P. Hall, an article taken from The All-Seeing Eye, Volume 4, Number 4, August 1927. The Delphian Oracles by Manly P. Hall. The worship of Apollo included the establishment and maintenance of places of prophecy, by means of which the gods could communicate with man and reveal futurity to such as deserved the boon. The early history of Greece abounds with accounts of talking trees, rivers, statues, and caves, within which nymphs, dryads, or dasmons had taken up their abodes, and from which they delivered oracles. While Christian authors have tried to prove that oracular revelations were delivered by the devil for the purpose of misleading humanity, they have not dared to attack the theory of oracles because of the repeated reference to oracles in their own sacred writings. If the onyx stones on the shoulders of Israel's high priest made known by their flashings the will of Jehovah, then a black dove, temporarily endowed with the faculty of speech, could certainly pronounce oracles in the temple of Jupiter Ammon. If the witch of Endor could invoke the shade of Samuel, who then gave prophecies to Saul, could not a priestess of Apollo call up the spectre of her liege to foretell the destiny of Greece? The most famous oracles of antiquity were those of Delphi, Dodona, Trophonius, and Latona, of which the talking oak trees of Dodona were the oldest. Though it is impossible to trace the genesis of the theory of oracular prophecy, it is known that many of the caves and fissures set aside by the Greek as oracles were sacred long before the rise of Grecian culture. The oracle of Apollo at Delphi remains one of the unsolved mysteries of the ancients. Alexander Wilder derives the word Delphi from Delphos, the womb. This name was chosen by the Greeks because of the shape of the cavern of the earth. The original name of the oracle was Pytho, so called because its chambers had been the abode of the great serpent Python, a fearful creature which had crept out of the slime left by the receding flood that had destroyed all human beings except Deucalion and Pyrrha. Climbing the side of Mount Parnassus, Apollo slew the serpent after a prolonged combat and threw the body of the reptile down the fissure of the oracle. From that time on, the sun god, surnamed the Pythian Apollo, gave oracles from the vent and lent himself as the patron god of Delphi. Dionysius shared this honor with him. After being vanquished by Apollo, the spirit of Python remained at Delphi as the representative of his conqueror. And with the aid of his effluvium, the priestess was able to come en rapport with the god. The fumes rising from the fissure of the oracle were supposed to come from the decaying body of Python. The name Pythoness, or Pythia, given to the female hierophant of the oracle, literally means one who has been thrown into a religious frenzy by inhaling fumes rising from decomposition. It is of further interest to note that the Greeks believed the oracle of Delphi to be the navel, or umbilicus of the world, thus proving that they considered the planet as an immense human being. The connection between the principle of oracular revelation and the occult significance of the navel is an important secret belonging to the ancient mysteries. The oracle is much older, however, than the story given above, which was probably formulated by the priest to explain the phenomena to those inquisitive persons whom they did not consider worthy to be enlightened regarding the true esoteric nature of the oracle. Some believe that the Delphic fissure was discovered by a Hyperborean priest, but as far back as recorded history goes, the cave was sacred and persons came from all parts of Greece and nearby countries to question the Delphian who dwelt in its chimney-like vent. Priests and priestesses guarded it and served the spirit who dwelt therein and who illuminated humanity through the gift of prophecy. The story of the original discovery of the oracle runs something as follows. Shepherds tending their flocks on the side of Mount Parnassus were amazed at the antics of goats that wandered close to a great chasm on the southwestern spur of the hill. The animals jumped about as though trying to dance and emitted strange cries unlike anything ever heard before. At last, one of the shepherds, curious to learn the cause of the phenomenon, approached the vent from which were rising noxious fumes. Immediately he was seized with a prophetic ecstasy, danced with wild abandon, sang, pronounced inarticulate sounds, and also foretold that which was to come to pass in the future. Others tried with the same result. The fame of the place spread, and many came to discover the future by inhaling the mephitic fumes which exhilarated to a point resembling the state of epilepsy. Not a few of those who came, being unable to control themselves and having temporarily the strength of madmen, tore themselves from those seeking to restrain them, and jumping into the vent, perished. In order to prevent this, a wall was erected around the fissure, and a prophetess was appointed to act as a mediator between the oracle and those who came to question it. According to later authorities, a tripod of gold ornamented with carvings of Apollo in the form of Python, the great serpent, was placed over the cleft, and on this arranged a specially prepared seat so constructed that a person would have difficulty in falling off while under the influence of the oracular fumes. Just prior to this time, the story to the effect that the fumes of the oracle were from the decaying body of Python was circulated. It is possible that the oracle itself revealed its own origin. For many centuries during its early history, virgin maidens were consecrated to the service of the oracle. They were called the Phoebides, or Pythia, and constituted that famous order now known as the Pythian priesthood. It is probable that women were chosen to receive the oracles because their sensitive and emotional natures responded more completely and quickly to the fumes of enthusiasm. 3 days before the time set to receive the communications from Apollo, the virgin priestess commenced the ceremony of purification. She bathed in the Castalian well, abstained from all food, drank only from the fountain of Casotis, which was brought into the temple through concealed pipes, and just before mounting the tripod, chewed a few leaves of the sacred bay tree. It has been suspected that the water was drugged to bring on distorted visions, or that the priests of Delphi were able to manufacture an exhilarating and intoxicating gas, which they conducted by subterranean ducts and released into the shaft of the oracle some feet below the surface. Neither of these theories has been proved, however, nor do they in any way explain the accuracy of the predictions. When the young prophetess had completed the process of purification, she was clothed in sanctified raiment and led to the tripod, upon which she seated herself, surrounded by the noxious vapors rising from the yawning fissure. Gradually, as she inhaled the fumes, a change came over her. It was as if a different spirit had entered into her body. She struggled, tore her clothing, and uttered inarticulate cries until after a time her struggles ceased. She then became very calm, and a great majesty seemed to possess her, and with eyes fixed in space and her body rigid, she uttered the prophetic words. The predictions were usually in the form of hexameter verse, but the words were often ambiguous and unintelligible. Every sound that was made and every movement of her body was carefully recorded by the 5 Hosai, or holy men, who were appointed as scribes to preserve the minutest details of each divination. The Hosai were appointed for life and were chosen from the direct descendants of Deucalion. Upon the delivery of the oracle, the Pythia began to struggle again, and the spirit released her. She was then carried or supported to a chamber of rest, where she remained until the nervous ecstasy passed away. In his dissertation on the mysteries, Iamblichus describes how the spirit of the oracle, a fiery demon, even Apollo himself, took control of the Pythoness and manifested through her. But the prophetess in Delphi, whether she gives oracles to mankind through an attenuated and fiery spirit bursting from the mouth of the cavern, or whether being seated in the adytum on a brazen tripod or on a stool with 4 feet, she becomes sacred to the god. Whichsoever of these is the case, she entirely gives herself up to a divine spirit and is illuminated with a ray of divine fire. And when indeed fire ascending from the mouth of the cavern circularly invests her in collected abundance, she becomes filled from it with a divine splendor. But when she places herself on the seat of the god, she becomes co-adapted to his stable prophetic power. And from both of these preparatory operations, she becomes wholly possessed by the god. And then indeed he is present with and illuminates her in a separate manner, and is different from the fire, the spirit, the proper seat, and in short from all the visible apparatus of the place, whether physical or sacred. Among the celebrities who visited the Oracle of Delphi were the immortal Apollonius of Tyana and his disciple Damsi, After making offerings and being crowned with a laurel wreath and given a branch of the same plant to carry on his hand, Apollonius passed behind the statue of Apollo that stood before the entrance to the cave and descended into the sacred place of the oracle. The priestess was also crowned with laurel and her head bound with a band of white wool. When Apollonius asked the oracle if his name would be remembered by future generations, the pythoness answered in the affirmative but declared that it would always be calumniated. Apollonius left the cavern in anger, but time has proved the accuracy of the prediction. For the early church fathers perpetuated the name of Apollonius as the Antichrist. For details of the story, see Histoire de la Magie. The messages given by the virgin prophetess were turned over to the philosophers of the oracle, whose duty it was to interpret the same and apply them to the problems on hand. The philosophers, having completed their labors, delivered the results to the poets, who immediately transposed the prophecies into odes and lyrics, setting forth in exquisite form the statements presumably made by Apollo, and published them for the edification of the populace. Serpents were much in evidence at the oracle of Delphi. The base of the tripod upon which the Pythia sat was composed of the twisted bodies of 3 large snakes. According to some authorities, one of the methods used to produce the prophetic ecstasy was to force the young priestess to gaze into the eyes of a serpent. When fascinated and hypnotized, she spoke forth with the voice of the god. While the early Pythian priestesses were always maidens, some still in their teens, a law was later passed that only women over 50 years of age should be the mouthpiece of the oracle. These older women dressed as young girls and went through the same ceremonial as the first Pythia. The change was probably the direct result of a series of assaults made upon the persons of the priestesses by the profane. During the early history of the Delphian oracle, the god only spoke every 7 years, and then upon the birthday of Apollo. But as time went on, the demand so increased that the Pythia was forced to seat herself upon the tripod every month. The time selected for the consultation and the questions to be answered were determined either by lot or a vote of the inhabitants of Delphi. It is generally admitted that the effect of the Delphian oracle upon the Greek culture was both constructive and profound. James Gardner sums up its influence in the following words: "Its responses revealed many a tyrant and foretold his fate. Through its means, many an unhappy being was saved from destruction and many a perplexed mortal guided in the right way. It encouraged useful institutions and promoted the progress of useful discoveries. Its moral influence was on the side of virtue, and its political influence in favor of the advancement of civil liberty." See Faiths of the World, first published in The Philosopher. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.